Today we're going on a journey collecting rocks and with a dash of supplies, magically transforming them into spookily cute painted rocks. The first step is giving your rocks a really good cleaning to get all that dirt off. So I'd use some water, soap, and a toothbrush, and then I let them dry. So in terms of supplies, I'm just using good old acrylic paint, and I'm also using paint markers. But the nice thing here is you don't actually need paint markers. You can do all of these projects just with acrylic paint. So for the first rock here, I'm giving it a base coat with some orange acrylic paint, and I'm painting right over top of those rocks without any primer. And then once one side is dry, I'm gonna flip it over and coat the back side of the rock, and then we're ready to paint on our pumpkin design. Now, once my paint was dried, I took a detailing brush and some brown paint and I started painting in the ridges of my pumpkin. So the way I like to paint my ridges is starting out with an oblong oval right in the middle of my pumpkin and then creating those curved lines around that oval so the center of my pumpkin stays in the center of my rock. And the jack-o'-lantern face is super easy basic shapes with triangles and a happy smile with some jaggedy teeth. Now, if you don't have acrylic markers, you could just use your acrylic paint. You just want to thin it down with some water and use your detailing brush. So the next rock, we're going to give it a coat with some white paint on the front side and on the back side of your rock. Now, if you're using rocks with kind of like ridges like mine, then it's not completely smooth. You just have to like work your paint into those grooves to get really good coverage. Now, once your coat of white is dried, I'm going to take a black Posca marker, or you can take black paint and a detailing brush, and I'm going to be painting on the eyes and the mouth of our ghost. And they're basically simple oval shapes. And then just to give our ghost a little bit more outline, I took that same black Posca marker and I outlined the rock, which brought out its arms that are kind of like outstretched and saying boo. And I also gave a little bit of a wavy flow at the bottom of my ghost too. So this rock, when I saw this in the forest, it was a really funky, like kite shaped, and then I immediately thought of candy corn. So to make this super cute kawaii styled candy corn rock, we're gonna start out with some white at the bottom, and we're just gonna coat all sides of the rock with that white paint. And then I'm gonna take some orange paint for the center of our candy corn, and I'm gonna do the same thing where I'm covering the sides and the front, and if you want to, you can actually cover the back as well. And then I'm going to coat the top with the yellow paint. And then I'm going to let it completely dry, and then I'm going to show you how to add a super cute kawaii face. And now for the kawaii face, I just basically took my black Posca marker, made 2 circle as eyes, a smiley face in the middle, and then 2 little glimmers in the eyes with some white paint. So the next rock, we're going to paint a spooky cat Halloween scene. So the first step here would be to paint and coat the entire rock with some nice purple paint. And a thing I wanted to mention about this rock in particular is that it's a smooth river rock. So this rock I didn't find in the forest. I actually found it on the side of my house where we have these river rocks. So that's another option of where you can go finding your rocks is in the forest, but you can also go on a lake shore or even an ocean shore. Now, once your purple base coat is dry to the touch, we're gonna paint a super simple and easy cat silhouette. So to begin with, we're just gonna paint a simple circle right in the middle with some black paint. And then we're gonna paint the body, which is basically another longer oval, and fill that in with the black paint as well. And then we're going to paint in the ears, which are just simple triangles right at the edges of the head. And then finally for the legs that are kind of popping out because this cat is kind of sitting on the ground looking up at the sky. So we're gonna paint in 2 little ovals for the legs. And then finally, we have to finish this cat off with a curly and whimsical tail. And since this cat is sitting and looking up at our night sky, we're going to add a crescent moon with some white paint and some sparkly stars, and even you can add a twinkling star, or here like I added a couple of shooting stars. So I recently watched the original Frankenstein movie with my sister-in-law a few weeks ago. So I just had to paint a Frankenstein Rock, a part of the series. So what I'm doing here is I'm base coating it with this beautiful punchy lime green paint, and then I'm going to let it dry. Then when my rock was nice and dry, I went in with some black paint and I painted in Frankenstein's hair, which is a super easy design. It's just a bunch of zigzags And then I filled it in with that same black paint. Now with Frankenstein's face, I started it out with creating the bottom part of Frankenstein's forehead with my black Posca marker, but here you can also use black paint and your brush. And then I'm creating 2 simple semicircles as his eyes. And then I'm gonna fill in his pupils with some black paint. And I'm making sure here I'm leaving an edge around the pupils because we're gonna be filling that out with white and it's just gonna bring his eyes to life. And then a simple nose, and we gotta give Frankenstein an expression. So I love to give him a happy expression because I wanna believe Frankenstein's a happy kind of monster. And so I did that, and then I'm adding a couple more details with some stitching on his forehead and a simple dimpled chin. Now to bring life into Frankenstein's eyes, we're going to paint around that pupil with some white paint. And the final step to bring his eyes to life is we're gonna add 2 white dots as those little glimmers in his eyes. Talking about glimmers in eyes, now we're gonna paint his spooky soulmate, the Bride of Frankenstein. So for the Bride of Frankenstein, I'm gonna give her a beautiful light blue skin color because some of the comics actually depict her with that light blue. Then once the light blue was dried, I went in and started the hairline for the Bride of Frankenstein, which was super easy, and filled it in with some black paint. And then for her face, I switched over to my Posca markers because they're fine lines and it just gives me a little bit more control. So I painted in her eyes with simple shapes, gave her a cute little stub nose, and again, another smile. And then I added her an eye color, which is purple, because I've been seeing a lot of her images depicted with a purple eye color. And then I added some eyebrows and I wanted to give her a cute little pucker, and then finished it off with her quintessential wavy white lines in her hair. Now the ending of the Frankenstein movie kind of bothered me, so I'm making my own happy ending for these 2 lovebirds. So when I first spotted this gem of a rock, I immediately envisioned a spooky haunted house. So that's what we're gonna whip up next. So here I'm just giving it a solid coat of black paint on the front, the sides, and the back. And now I'm just using some yellow paint to paint in the door and a couple of windows on the front, and also a couple of windows on the side. And then I'm using my white Posca marker to add a number to the home, a spooky spider web, and I also wanted to add some bricks on the side of the roof since the rock had really beautiful sides. So I did that. And then the final thing here is I wanted to add some bars on top of the doors and the windows with my black Posca marker. All right, for the next rock, we're going to get a little girly and paint a pink witchy hat rock. So the first step is I base coated my rock with some really nice pink paint. And then once that paint was dried, I did an outline of a witch's hat that's kind of slouched over with some dark purple paint. I then added a buckle, which I'm going to show you how to embellish even more in the final step. And then to give our witch's hat a little bit more pizzazz, I added some bright, punchy lime green stripes on our witch's hat. And since we're pizzazzing things up, I embellished the buckle with some beautiful gold paint. So if you're looking for an easy design, this next rock is for you. So I'm just base coating it with some simple black paint. And then once it's dried, I'm going to show you how to paint the easiest spider web that I've ever come across. So I learned this technique from a fabulous channel called Easy Peasy and Fun. And it was really, really easy peasy and fun. So you basically draw the straight lines first, and then you draw the webs connecting them all. And then you take a step back and you're like, I painted that? It's an awesome feeling. So for the next rocks, we're gonna channel our inner witchy vibes for this triptych rock trio. So here I'm base coating these finger-like rocks with that same bright green paint we painted our Frankenstein rock with. And then I'm gonna take some purple paint and I'm gonna paint in the fingernails on each of our witch's fingers. And then I'm gonna paint the wrinkles on our witch's fingers with a black paint marker or black paint. The last step I like to do to really preserve all your beautiful artwork is to seal it. Now what I like to use is this DuraClear satin varnish. It's a brush on variety, and I'm gonna show you how I apply it, just so you get a really smooth finish. And it gives a little bit of sheen as well once it's dried. Now another option too that I've seen people do is use the spray can variety, and that just makes it a little bit faster than the brush on one. So basically I have it here in my bowl and I'm just taking a paintbrush, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm really lightly going to apply it. So I don't wanna apply too much downward pressure, because sometimes what can happen is the paint could lift and that would ruin your design. So we wanna use really gentle downward strokes. Just like that. And it's gonna go on a little bit foggy initially, but it's actually gonna dry clear. So I've gone ahead and sealed all my rocks, and I wanna show you how it looks like when it's dried. So you can see this one was a satin finish, and it gives the rock a really beautiful sheen and reflection to it. And at the same time, that paint is like sealed onto your rock. You cannot like scratch it off. And I've also sealed the whole rock on both sides. I hope you guys enjoyed all these easy and spooky rock creations. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, lots of peace, love, and color your way.